We are going to the movies, DNA. Kate Wilson here with another episode of All Access DNA. In a heartfelt conversation, I talked to Devon Sidell and Amy Byer Shaneman about the personal and emotional journey behind their film, Love, Danielle. I was able to see a screening of the movie and was overwhelmed by the vulnerability and raw storytelling. I highly encourage you to go to lovedaniellefilm.com and find a screening near you. In our conversation, we talk about BRCA gene mutations, the impact of hereditary cancer, and the power of storytelling and raising awareness. Let's get started. Welcome, Devon and Amy. I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having us, Kate. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, we are.
I'm excited to hear both your stories and how it led to this project. So that's what we want to talk about is the new film, Love, Danielle. And for those that haven't seen it yet or are planning to see it, the basic story is the character Danielle, played by Devon, tests positive for BRCA1 or BRCA1 gene mutation. And so Danielle learns it puts her at a high risk of developing breast and ovarian cancer. And I guess throughout the movie, Danielle contemplates preemptively removing her ticking time bomb breasts, which I'd heard that quote and I was like, I had a lot of patients I worked with kind of describe it that way as well. And also potentially removing reproductive organs before Danielle gets cancer, like her older sister. So I know that was one of the storylines in the movie. I wanted to really start back at the beginning, but what led you both to this project, to Love, Danielle?
Well, I guess I'll start. I got the idea to create this film literally while I was waking up from my anesthesia from my double mastectomy. I remember lying in the recovery room thinking, my gosh, there's nothing like in entertainment really about what I've just been through or what other people will have to go through who are in this similar situation. And, I, as an actor, as someone who, this is what I do, I thought, oh my gosh, I wonder if I could work with people and create something that could help other people.
So you were literally coming out of the anesthesia from having some of these prophylactic or preemptive surgeries. And it occurred to you that this really wasn't something maybe out there in mainstream media so that people were aware.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And Amy, what about you? Kind of how did you get to the project?
The project, a few different ways. I was recommended by someone to Devon. And also I had connected with Devon via Twitter simultaneously.
She DM'd me.
Yeah, I DM'd
She
Devon.
slid into my DM.
I know.
Did. Hey, it worked out. It worked out because, and I saw she was working on this project and I basically just said, hey, I'm very passionate about, getting information around hereditary cancer and BRCA, getting it out there correctly, making sure the information is done right. And can I hop on board, basically?
Because so Amy, you are known, I would say, I guess in the Twitterverse, but the internet verse as the BRCA responder.
Right. Yeah. So basically that is my advocacy platform. I've sort of named myself a BRCA responder because I was responding to everything about BRCA. And so that seemed like the natural name. And, my hereditary cancer advocacy efforts began with my own family story and what didn't happen and my frustration with that. And so I've been doing this for 15 plus years now of educating, empowering individuals, supporting them in the trenches via Facebook support groups, one-on-one support, my doctors, give people my number all the time. So yeah, that's basically who I am, the responder.
So you both have a very personal connection, I think, with the movie, with the story, both being individuals who have a BRCA mutation or gene change. So I guess, Devon, I'll ask this to both of you, but I'll start with you, Devon. How closely does Danielle's story reflect your own experience?
I love when people ask that question because the first thing I like to say is that my mother in real life is nothing like the mother in the film. And my poor mother is such a good sport because the mother in the film is not a great character. And my mother is such a great sport because basically the rest of it is very much based on my own personal story. I when I was 14, my mom was diagnosed with stage C ovarian cancer. I watched her go through that. She somehow miraculously survived. And then her sister, who was 2 years older than she was, died a few years later of ovarian cancer. So from the time I was 14 or so, I felt this weight on my shoulders. I felt like, I'm probably going to die from ovarian cancer, and there's really nothing I can do because there's no reliable screening method. It's something I carried around with me for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And when it became clear that I could have the genetic testing and not be dropped by my insurance if I tested positive, then my OBGYN convinced me to ultimately have the testing. And it turned out that I had a BRCA1 gene mutation, which I pretty much assumed that my mother had been tested a while after her cancer and she had the mutation, although she had not wanted to tell us about the genetic testing in case it's something we didn't want to know.
Okay.
If we wanted to know, we could ask her and she would let us know, which I ultimately did. So I sat with that information, and I think I was in my early 30s, and I got the referrals to see the gynecological oncologist and the breast surgeon and the reconstructive surgeon. And I was overwhelmed and in a vortex. And I was told to see a genetic counselor, but I wasn't sort of told why or what the importance of that would be. So I didn't really see anyone except for the gynecological oncologist, who at that point said to me, with your family history, even though your mom had ovarian cancer at 43, you can probably wait until you're 40 to undertake these surgeries because they're not easy surgeries. There are
No.
lots of complications. I'm still dealing with a lot of them. And I felt a relief. My husband and I talked about it. I thought, you know what? Let's just not worry about this until I'm 40. And then 2 years later, my older sister, who was only 38 at the time, was diagnosed with breast cancer. And at that point, I just said, you know what? That's it. Just take everything, take it all out. I went with her. She started chemo on a Friday. That Monday, I had my first surgery where I had my ovaries, fallopian tubes, uterus, cervix removed. So my sister was going through chemo, and I was making this decision to possibly avoid ever having to go through that. And that was sort of the crux of where the movie came from, that sister relationship and the fact that it was something that the whole family was having to deal with, and the way that you make decisions based on what's happening in your own personal life. My own mother is a 2-time cancer survivor. The mother in the film, we needed to create a character that represented sort of the opposite way of thinking. We wanted to show the response that I got from other people in what they thought I should do or shouldn't do in that situation. And so the mother kind of became this foil for my character, Danielle, as a way to represent some of the outside chatter and opinions that we as previvors sometimes get. So, ultimately the film is quite closely based on the facts of my life, but a lot of the characters are a little bit different. My character is not exactly me. We had to, do some stuff for a dramatic effect and for some comedy and all of that.
And so your sister in real life, did she undergo the genetic testing prior to her diagnosis?
Yes,
and so
she
she
did.
was struggling
Only
with some of
about
the same. So did she have some of those same decisions, or was it so close together with the diagnosis?
hers were very close together, and that's how I felt. I just felt so incredibly lucky. There's a moment in the film where I say to Jamie King, who's playing my sister, "Thank you for getting cancer so I might not have to." And that is literally what I said to my sister. If she had not gotten that diagnosis, I might still have been waiting to have my surgeries. And, that kind of situation with a sister, that kind of relationship it's something that is so strong and stays with you. And that ended up being, the sisters really are like sort of the focus of the film.
So Amy, can you tell us a little bit about your own personal story? Because you talked about having a BRCA gene mutation. Is it reflected in Danielle's story?
Well, it is. And that's really why I wanted to be a part of this, so that I could help sort of create the narrative and change the narrative and have the narrative reflect what even though every previvor experience is different, there are some generalities. So, for instance, one thing that I really experienced that I wanted put in the film that Devon did not in real life were the hot flashes and being on the estrogen patch. That was something I thought that would really, just a scene visually of her struggles, of the aftermath, post-surgical effects. I really thought that would really be a realistic inclusion, and that was important to me. So yes, that reflected my own experience. And also, I think the doctor's office scene at the beginning where she's getting inundated with this information and she's basically, it's sounding like Charlie Brown's teacher. She's not really hearing that she's positive for a gene mutation. That was definitely my experience. 100%.
Yeah, and it's interesting you both talk about kind of the recovery from these surgeries. I think sometimes people hear, well, we can have, double mastectomy, we can get your ovaries and your uterus removed. And I don't think in this day we can do amazing things with medicine and technology, but I don't think people still realize these are large undertakings. These are major surgeries. And think about removing ovaries. That does put you into menopause, right? So was that part of telling the stories that you wanted to not only show kind of the pre-decisions, things that have to be made in order to have some of these medical treatments, but kind of what happens after?
Specifically because the scene before, she's talking with her sister, me, played by Jamie King, and she's saying, I just want to feel normal again. And part of that not feeling normal is she's getting used to her own body, but she's having these hot flashes. She's having to wear a patch now. It's a new normal for her. So absolutely.
And Devon, is that still some of the things that you were talking about, kind of experiencing post-surgery and some of the things? I mean, do either of you feel like it's something that you adapt to this new normal, or do you feel like there's still ongoing kind of medical things that you're dealing with?
Yeah, that's a great to bring up. I mean, we wanted to include that in the film because, yeah, that is sort of the reality of how we live after these surgeries. There are things like bone density scans. There are things like Amy actually just told me about the CT coronary artery scan, which we should be getting since we were in surgical menopause. And we're kind of constantly checking up on things that can potentially go wrong because of these surgeries. Besides just the physical sort of look of your body being different, you sort of have both of those. You have the look of it, and then you have some of the things that you can't see.
Right.
And it's a lifelong thing. We will be dealing with these for the rest of our lives.
I just had my checkup with my gastroenterologist this morning. I'm due for my EUS pancreatic screen and my colonoscopy. So that's just, another BRCA carrier. I have a family history of the pancreatic cancer as well and colon cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one other thing we didn't even touch on so much in the movie. The movie's just the tip of the iceberg, really. But part of, after you get your ovaries out and you have your preventative mastectomy, you're still dealing with other scans and other screenings.
And tell me a little bit more about kind of what led to the decision to make this like a feature film? Because again, my background's in genetic counseling, so I'm fairly familiar with books and podcasts and some of the things that have been written, but I haven't necessarily seen a major feature film in this vein. So Devon, to your point, so why was it important to use this medium to bring the story forward?
I always respond first by saying, I'm an actress, so maybe it was just my own ego. But no, I mean, it's, that is how I express myself. That is how I feel emotion and process things. And to me, it just felt so natural that if I were to do a project about this or try to spread the information, that it would be in the form of a film, scripted film. So that's where that idea came from for me. But I also, Amy and I have discussed a lot that we were trying to make something that was, it might be the wrong word, but sort of more palatable, something that was also funny and entertaining and something that people are used to seeing. Everyone loves movies. And if we could create something that didn't feel like it was a PSA, then maybe we would be able to reach the people who have the mutations and also the family members and the friends and the people who love those people.
Yeah, I think that's so important, having it not necessarily feel like a lecture or an educational PSA type of thing, because we talked about some of the medical aspects, but there's really a lot of emotional impacts. There's family dynamics, Devon, like you talked about with the sister and the mom, but even extended family, talking about your identity as a person with bodily changes and things that you're going over. So how did you show or want to show the emotional or even the family dynamic impact of genetic testing and what could come from these genetic test results?
I think that, look, genetics, it affects the whole family, and it affects the whole family differently. You're the one who receives the information, but your mom's going to have a different experience with that news, your father, your sister, your friends. We see the friend sort of, telling her what she thinks she should do. But I think it really illustrates all of the emotions that family members have as well. It's not just what Devon was going through or Danielle was going through on screen. It's indicative of how people really react in real life.
Yeah, it was important for us to work to show the relationship between Danielle and her husband. What is that relationship like with your spouse when you're making decisions like this? How much of it is your own decision? How much of it do you share with them? How much, are they supporting you? And we created a character that is very supportive and, is a great husband, but like most people in this situation, sort of doesn't know the right thing to say. And it was important for us to show that there are so many different ways to respond to it, but that it really involves everybody.
Yeah, I think that's important that there is different responses and that it's going to impact people differently because one, it's not just that they're in your life as a family member or a friend, but specifically if they are a family, they may also potentially be affected or carry the same, gene mutation, gene change. Was there any discussion about impacts on like kids or children? Full disclosure, I'm scheduled to see the movie in 2 weeks, so that's why I haven't seen it yet. So I don't know if there was any discussion with kids with the character of Danielle.
Yes, there's a lot about that. And it is based on my own story. In the film, Danielle and her husband have always wanted kids, but there's something of a, time crunch once the sister is diagnosed with cancer. And that is sort of the situation with my husband and I. We weren't necessarily sure we wanted to have kids, but when that option is looking like it's going to be taken away from you, it definitely changes your perspective. And in the film, yes, Danielle and her husband really want to have kids. And then there's that fear of, if my sister is this young and has been diagnosed, what if I'm diagnosed with ovarian cancer, before we have these biological kids and I don't survive to raise them?
Yeah, I think that's something to think about too and to point out to people. It can sound very daunting being faced with all of these decisions. And I know some of the families that I've worked with have been on the fence, right, on whether or not to undergo genetic testing. Is your hope that people will consider genetic testing more strongly after it or come into the option of genetic testing with maybe more of a holistic thought? So knowing some of the factors that they may need to think about, is there any sort of message around the genetic testing for BRCA that you would see in this movie?
Well, yeah, I'll answer that. I mean, the number one thing is we want anyone who sees this film to, number one, prioritize their health and realize that that's okay. And I think you'll appreciate this answer, Kate, because instead of wanting to, you talk about genetic testing. I would want everyone who saw this film who said, hey, there's cancer in my family. I'm not sure. I don't know. I would want them to reach out and speak with a certified genetic counselor. Let that person who's the expert assess them and walk them through what all this may or may not mean. Ask them, draw their pedigree. Because for the average person to assess their own risk, we know that they don't, they can write out their family history and as much as they know, but we know the genetic counselor is going to ask those next level questions and really have them dig deep because maybe stomach cancer and an aunt was really ovarian cancer. So that's what I hope is that I hope it opens conversations amongst family members to really take a look at their own family history, prioritize their health, and if they have any inkling that they may be at increased risk for developing certain cancers, that they do reach out to a certified genetic counselor. And we do give a link at the end of the film for people where to go in order to do that.
Yeah, I think there is, the specialty, as it were, of like undergoing informed genetic testing. But one of the things you had mentioned, Amy, was hearing some of the news about testing positive, right? Became the Charlie Brown speak. So is there anything that you would encourage healthcare professionals to do when giving people this information, maybe to either help them hear what they need to hear or potentially come back at another time to give them additional information? Are there any insights or tips that you would give healthcare providers?
Well, the one thing that I would say, and this is from feedback I get from many patients, plus my own experience, but I've received this feedback a lot. I think that healthcare providers really they're doing this day in and day out. They go see patient one in this store, patient two, patient three. They have to realize that the patient that they're meeting with is hearing the information they're about to give them for the very, very first time. And you have to have a certain amount of responsibility and wear kid gloves to a certain point with that in terms of being sensitive and listening to them. No matter what you say, it's going to affect somebody, and it may not be a great reaction, because with any sort of health news that you hear, oh, you have this gene mutation, it's not going to be this exciting, wonderful thing. But I think handling it with a certain sensitivity and realizing that you don't want to say that this is a gift. You don't want to say this. You don't want to say it's the gift of knowledge on that first appointment. That's not how the patient is going to see it. Maybe the fifth or sixth appointment you're seeing them after but I think you really have to remember the information you're providing is the first time that they're hearing it.
I think that's very helpful. You have written a memoir and produced a documentary in addition to Love Danielle. So you've had a few projects. Why did you want to be involved in the storytelling for this movie after some of the other projects that you had worked on?
So I wanted to be part of this definitely because, like I had said before, being a part of creating the narrative, a film that deals with hereditary cancer and BRCA, and also changing the narrative, making sure men were included in the picture, a male BRCA carrier, making sure that the previvor experience was told as accurately as possible within a fictionalized or loosely based story, on Devon's story. That was really important to me, that I felt a responsibility. It's exciting to me because there are so many TV shows out there that just had little tidbits of BRCA and hereditary cancer in them. There wasn't ever a scripted feature narrative that I've seen that talked about BRCA at length and had educational components in it. It was more of just a mention of, oh, she has breast cancer and she has the BRCA gene. There were like little tidbits here and there. So that was very exciting for me.
And so this allowed some elements of storytelling and entertainment, but also with pulling in some more educational components as well.
The whole educate, entertain, empower, which is that, definitely fuels me.
Mm-hmm. Devon, as the co-writer and the lead actor, what was it like stepping into the role of Danielle? Was it empowering or challenging or a little bit of both, given that it's similar to your story, but isn't exactly your story?
I think it was empowering and challenging and very, very surreal. When I was going through a lot of these situations the first time, the real time, there wasn't a lot of time to process. There wasn't a lot of time to really think about what was happening. I felt like I was on a bit of a time crunch. I had decisions to make, and interacting with my sister at that time, there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of unknown. And to come back and years later, basically, to be reliving this to an extent, again, not exactly, but to an extent, really gave me a chance to process what I did not process at the time. I think I was really able to sit in the moment. I was really able to think, what am I really feeling in this situation? What's going on with my sister? What's going on with me? What's going on with my husband? And it was kind of, speaking of the word gift, that was kind of a gift. I mean, I was able to work through some stuff that I think I had not worked through at all. And then, it was incredibly surreal to be sitting with someone who was not my sister having a conversation. It was similar to a conversation I had with my real sister. I hope that it sort of honored her. So yeah, it was a strange combination of things, but ultimately it was very empowering. It felt like I was able to sort of take over my own narrative and have some sort of control over something that I had no control over. And I guess that I still have no control over.
Well, and I wonder too, do you felt like you were able to see some other parts of it because now you're not in it. You're sort of somebody who's stepping from the outside looking in and taking a slightly different perspective?
I think so. I mean, I guess I did have to have that. There was the sort of objectivity of trying to write the script and working with Amy and my co-writer about, what's the best way to get this idea across. And so sometimes there were things that were in there that I needed to do that were just for the sake of getting ideas across and sharing the information. And that was very, very important. So there was like an objectivity as well. So I felt like this was a reliving, but there was a lot of other important stuff at stake that sort of took precedence to that. Like it was most important that we got this story out that we wanted to tell and that we got the right information out and that we got the feelings right.
And Amy, you had used the term previvor. So we hadn't really talked too much about that, but I'd love to know both of your thoughts on being a previvor. So being someone who has a gene mutation, right, that increases the risk for cancer, but not being diagnosed with cancer. Because I have talked to a few folks in the past where it's almost sort of this in-between space, right? Because I am seen one way, but I'm having all these procedures and medical treatments, but I don't have a diagnosis of cancer. So I wondered if you could both speak to just that previvor experience.
Well, I mean, I'm so grateful to have escaped a cancer diagnosis, first of all, up until this point, and also that I was able to remain a previvor up until the age of 40. I feel very lucky considering all of the cancer in my family and also at young ages. So that experience, I mean, look, I still go to doctor's appointments all the time, but I am overall, this experience, I always say my number one feeling is just relief and gratitude and being thankful. Now, if you were to talk to me right after, right before my surgeries or right after, and when I was a little younger, maybe it would have been a little bit different. I was still raising young kids. I was busy. Now I've had so many years that I've lived with this. I'm grateful. Grateful to be breathing, grateful to be alive, grateful that I do not have a cancer diagnosis and that I took matters into my own hands to reduce my risk as much as I possibly could.
Devon, how has it been for you kind of being in this, I guess, previvor bucket or having that name to it?
That sense of relief that Amy mentioned is sort of the top thing for me. Waking up both times from my preventative, the oophorectomy and the hysterectomy, and then the double mastectomy, I just remember feeling that weight that I had been carrying since I was 14 was gone, that I did not have to be waking up in the middle of the night thinking, oh my gosh, I might have ovarian cancer and I won't know until it's too late. The relief was huge. I also have a sense of guilt because of the timeline of everything. The fact that my sister was going through chemo when I decided to have these surgeries was hard. I felt like, why do I get to avoid this situation and my sister has to go through it? Why did my mom have to go through it? And the fact that they were happening at the same time was just such a strange experience. Yeah, it was hard to look at my sister in the chemo chair and then know that I was about to avoid that. Like, see ya, I'm going to go have these surgeries and I'm not going to necessarily have to worry about that. I still feel the guilt. It's not fair. Nobody should have to go through that. Nobody should have to go through chemo. And I feel incredibly lucky that I am, as Amy said, up until this point, have been able to avoid it. And I wish that other people didn't have to go through it.
Devon, you and I, we basically are the pioneers in our family, the first that were able to reduce our cancer risk so drastically by having these preventative surgeries. So, I don't know. That's something that I feel a lot of responsibility to keep that. I'm not exactly sure what I'm saying here.
Well, it seems like you appreciate the opportunity that you've had to make some of these decisions, right? And to be able to reduce your risk, but you're also not taking it for granted.
No,
either.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you feel like there are enough resources, support out there for folks who find themselves in this previvor group now? Because I know that was something, again, like you said, you're kind of pioneers, so it's still a growing area. Our goal is to ultimately one day have many, many, many previvors, right? Hundreds, thousands, millions, because we're getting to people before it develops. But we're still trying to get there because a lot of folks, unfortunately, still don't know that they have a BRCA or other type of mutation until after they've been diagnosed. So how do you feel either support is for the previvors or getting the word out to people that might be previvors, they just don't know it yet?
Well, I think for us, this film, and this is something that's, I think, very helpful. But in terms of other resources, I think there's always room for improvement and more resources. And how do you reach people, in different cultures? How do you reach people, you know, just who have a whole different ethical experience around genetic
Shoot.
testing? So
Mm-hmm.
there are support groups in Facebook. There's support groups that I refer people to and online, and obviously local cancer centers, hereditary cancer clinics. There's always room for improvement and always room for more resources out there. And, that's why we wanted to do this film. That's why I think I'll continue to do creative endeavors surrounding this subject matter, because I want there to be more resources than when I first found out.
I'm always surprised when we speak with people after screenings and how many people say, well, there are two things. People, number one, say, I didn't even know you could get tested for this, which I think, oh my God, they didn't even know you could get tested. To me, it blows my mind. And the second thing is how many people say, I have a friend who has this. I mean, we're just learning how absolutely pervasive it is, and also learning how little information is out there.
And also how little unfortunately, a lot of healthcare providers still know.
Yeah, I think what's hard with healthcare providers too is they still don't realize that it can be accessible to people. And so I know that with some of the screenings, it sounds like there's partnerships potentially or with some testing organizations and things like that as well. I believe the one that's happening in Atlanta is having something like that with support from a testing
Right.
lab.
Yes, that is with J-Screen. They are holding this screening, and which is fantastic. And I'm not exactly sure if they will be providing testing on the site or providing, a discount code or a talk with a genetic counselor. But yes, that is definitely one way to connect the dots for people.
There's a screening happening in England. There's a screening happening in England with a company called Genetics, and they partnered with the NHS. And this screening is to bring awareness to their BRCA testing program that the NHS is offering. I guess they're saying they don't know how much longer the program is going to be available, and they want to make sure that anyone who wants to be tested, and that to me was huge when I heard that we were going to be involved in something that was promoting something the NHS was offering.
Absolutely.
Which is incredible.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So tell me, as we wrap up, tell me, how can people watch Love Danielle? How can they find it? How can they attend one of these screenings? If it's somebody that works in the healthcare profession, is there opportunities for them to have their broader teams or even bring in students or folks that can watch it?
We are currently playing in festivals, but we are working on getting distribution. So it should be available for streaming at some point. We're not sure yet when. But if you go to our website, lovedaniellefilm.com, and you go to the contact us, you can sign up for our email list, which is the best way to know what's happening. You can also find us on social media. We're on Twitter or X. We're on Facebook and Instagram. Just look for Love Danielle Film. It's one of those iterations in terms of the handle. And we will be sharing all that information as it comes out. We're working hard on it.
Yes, we have a couple of film festivals coming up as well. Woods Hole Film Festival in Massachusetts, and also in Connecticut, we have a film festival. So definitely go to our website or social media handles to find out when those screenings are.
Well, I just appreciate you both being with us today and just taking the time. And I'm excited to hopefully meet both of you in person in a couple of weeks.
That would be wonderful.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Kate.
For more information about this episode, visit allaccessdna.podbean.com, where you can also stream all episodes of the show. This link is also in the show notes for easy access. Any inquiries on the podcast can be sent to allaccessdna@gmail.com. Check out our Patreon at patreon.com/allaccessdna and consider donating to get bonus content, submit questions for our guests, and connect with other genetic curious individuals. Note that this podcast is for entertainment and education and is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice. Please consult your physician with any questions you may have regarding your health. Please rate and review the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. This helps other people like you discover the show. All Access DNA is hosted, produced, and edited by Kate Wilson. The logo design is by Designs by NKJ. Thanks for listening and join us next time.